Hey everybody, it's Lori, and I am here today with my Better Late Than Never February reading wrap up. I read, and I just completely forgot how many I read. I literally just counted this. Okay. I read 16 books in the month of February. A majority of those books were all in one series, so I'll kind of talk about that as a whole and then get into the other books. So the book series that I read most of the books of during the month of February was the Cedar Cove series by Debbie Macomber. These are kind of women's fiction romance. I don't really quite know how to categorize them. Novels set in a fictional town of Cedar Cove, which is in Washington State. And it has a very large cast of characters. So the first book I read from the series is actually the last book in the series, and I read that back in December because it's kind of a Christmas book. But each book is focusing in a little bit more on one of the characters' stories, but there's still other characters that you're finding out more of their kind of longer storyline during each book. So one of the unique things about these books is the author numbered them in their titles. So the first book in the series is, I believe, 16 Lighthouse Way. So it begins with a 1, so that's the first book. The next book was 204. I can't remember any of the street names. The next one had a 3 at the beginning on through. So I read the 200 through the 1100 addresses. Plus a Christmas anthology that I just threw in there because why not while I'm reading all these things anyway. So that is 11 of the 16 books that I read were in that series. So I talked a little bit about them, I believe, in my January reading wrap up because I believe I read the first book in the series in January. And I had read several of the others by the time I filmed my reading wrap up. So I had some thoughts on it. And the things I really enjoyed about the series were that there was this kind of wide cast of characters, and that every book furthered the story for each of them. So it wasn't just one character per book. All the characters had part of their story in each of the books. Well, not all of them in all of the books, but they would go from one book to the next. And so it was kind of fun to have this whole community of people that you were learning about. And most of the books had some sort of like mystery or intrigue going on. So like somebody turns up dead at the bed and breakfast. Somebody's husband goes missing. There's a mysterious fire, a dead body shows up. I mean, so, all sorts of kind of crazy things. And that kind of kept the storyline interesting, having all these different things occur in this community. So, because they are romance novels, I do want to take a minute to talk about the romance part of it, and particularly the sex part of it. So, I'm not a big sex in book person. Like, I don't care. I'm not that interested. And it wasn't too graphic or anything in these, but it got really repetitive throughout the books. So, particularly the early ones, pretty much every sex scene involved a woman's nipples hardening and a man cupping her breast in his hand, and like I didn't want to hear about that ever again by the end of like book 4 maybe. And that didn't stay the whole time. Like I think that perhaps she realized she was getting kind of repetitive because it wasn't through all 12 books, but like the first 4, it happened so many times. So I guess another slight criticism of the series is this repetitive nature. So not just in sex scenes, although that really got old really fast. But like all of the characters kind of have, how do I phrase this? There's a disproportionate number of characters in the novel that have these kind of wild things happen to them or whatever. There are at least three Las Vegas marriages and an elopement elsewhere. And we've got like a cast of like, I don't know, 30 characters that we regularly visit. So we had like 3 of them eloped to Las Vegas, 1 of them eloped somewhere else. There's like 6 or 7 divorcees. There's 2 different times where a one-time sexual encounter ends up producing a child, and then they don't want to tell the dad that they're pregnant. So that happens a lot. It's just like these very specific storylines just seem to happen multiple times. Like, number of people I know that ran off and got married in Las Vegas, I can think of 0. So just the percentage of this tiny little town, which is, you know, supposed to be significantly bigger than the tiny little town I live outside of, but it's still supposed to be a small town where everybody knows everybody. Why? And it's not like Las Vegas is particularly close because they're in Washington State. So that's a long way to go. So anyway, some of the things got really repetitive, and you're like, why do these same things keep happening? Why is this a storyline that just keeps coming up? You could think, I guess I just would expect more variety in the storyline. So that was my major criticism, was just kind of the repetitive nature. But I did enjoy them. I think on average they took me 3 to 4 hours to read. So I apparently enjoyed them enough to just read my February away. So, you know, they're fun books. They do have a few things that I'm a little iffy on, and romance really isn't my favorite genre anyway, so it's not surprising that some of the issues I have might be pretty common romance novel tropes, maybe. I don't know if in a lot of romance novels, if people are always running off to Las Vegas to get married or what, but, you know, they were fun books, not earth-shattering, definitely easy reads, so if that's something that you're looking for, they don't take overwhelming amounts of brain power, so that's kind of what I needed in February. I guess next I'll talk about the book Salvation City by Sigrid Nunez. And this is a book that my husband heard about on a radio show or a podcast or something, and he had asked me to see if I could get it. So I checked it out from the library, and then he wasn't reading it, so I ended up reading it. I did not know why he heard about it in a podcast. If he told me, I had forgotten by the time I actually started reading it. It's a pandemic book. I've been reading a lot of those, but I was not expecting, when I went into this one, another pandemic book. So basically, the storyline is that there is this teenage boy who is the lone survivor in his family after a flu pandemic just devastates America. And this is in, I'm not exactly sure what year it's set in, but in recent times. You know, there's internet and cell phones and things like that. So it's not like a historical fiction type book. It's more of a dystopian novel. And I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a YA novel, but it sure feels like a YA novel. So I'm going to assume it was written as a YA novel. So this teenage boy loses his parents and is taken in by a family in this community called Salvation City. His family was non-religious, of different varieties. So he didn't really have any sort of religious background. And this is a extremely Protestant community that believes that the rapture is going to happen pretty much any time. We're kind of living in the end days. So he is living with a couple. The husband is a pastor, and the wife, I guess, kind of stays home. And they don't have any children of their own, so they kind of want to adopt him. So we have him adjusting to this new life, and we also have flashbacks of his remembering what was going on during the flu and after the flu, after his parents had died, when he went into an orphanage and that sort of thing. So the flu details and some of the like political stuff going on was super creepy accurate to some of the stuff that's gone on over the past year in the United States now with our, COVID pandemic rather than flu. So that was kind of hard to read. So it was kind of a slow starting book for me because I had a hard time getting through the beginning information about kind of what happened. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good book. There's some little twists and turns in what happens. And it really doesn't have much of an ending. Basically, the ending is the kid saying, who knows what's going to happen next kind of thing. I mean, like just being open to change, I guess, is maybe the ending of the book. So, definitely not my favorite dystopian post-apocalyptic type novel, but it was a pretty good one. Definitely is more true to life than a lot, because I feel like a lot of the dystopian are more like science fiction-y, like some sort of technology goes wrong. And this was very much, there was a bad strain of the flu. It killed a whole bunch of people. So, I'm feeling very true to life right now. Next up, I'm going to talk about Death Comes for the Archbishop. This was the Close Read Podcast's book for, I think, the end of January and the beginning of February. I'm not exactly sure when they finished up because I am a slacker and I'm always behind. But I have read Death Comes for the Archbishop before, and so this time I actually listened to an audiobook version, which was kind of nice because that gave me some pronunciation that I wouldn't get with the novel. I really enjoy this book. It's the story of a priest who is sent to the New Mexico region and to be the bishop, and eventually he becomes Archbishop, obviously, with Death Comes for the Archbishop. And it's just kind of like the story of his life from coming from the Midwest area where he was already a missionary and being sent out to New Mexico. So there's a lot of kind of shorter stories in here of just little snippets of his life and the life of his friend who came with him as kind of his assistant. So this is really good. I mean, can't really go wrong. Willa Cather has a great way of writing in almost a poetic style, so it's very it's a very good read. If not, I'm not going to say it's a difficult read, but it takes a little bit more brain power than, say, my Cedar Cove series that I read as well. So definitely worth your time if you haven't read it. Another book that I finished in the month of February, I think I started back in December, and it's One More Thing by B.J. Novak. And it's short story collection, so that's why it took me so long to read, because you could just pick it up and read a few stories and then put it down for a long time. So B.J. Novak played Ryan in The Office and wrote for The Office and things like that, so he's hilarious. And some of these were super hilarious stories, and some of them were not really my speed, and that's okay. I don't expect an entire short story collection to be my cup of tea. But I think I got this at a thrift store or something a number of years ago just because I thought it would be a fun read sometime. And it was. Got a little raunchy at times. So that's my warning on this one. A little bit raunchy, but it was funny. And it took me a long time to get through, but not because there's anything wrong with the stories in it. It's just sometimes I've used short stories to fill in between other books. Then I have two nonfiction books that I read. The first was How to Be a Good Creature by Cy Montgomery. And the subtitle to this is A Memoir in 13 Animals. Now, Cy Montgomery wrote The Good Good Pig and The Soul of an Octopus, which I've read both of those. And she has an amazing way of relating to animals and writing about animals. So this is a little bit of a memoir of hers talking about how animals have affected her life, and she uses a bunch of different animals, from her pig, Christopher Hogwood, that she wrote The Good Good Pig about, to, you know, the octopus, two of the octopuses that were in her book Soul of the Octopus are in there. But also like a spider, and her dogs, both a dog growing up and a couple of her dogs that she had throughout her adulthood. So it just kind of is going through the different lessons she learned from these different animals in her life. So I really enjoy Cy Montgomery's writing. I don't always agree with Cy Montgomery. Like, The Good Good Pig has discussion questions at the end of it, and we don't see eye to eye much on most of the discussion questions she put at the end of her book. But I really appreciate the way that she talks about animals and the lessons that she learns in her way of writing about them. So that was another really good book by Cy Montgomery. And then the last one I have to talk about is Covenanted Happiness, Love and Commitment in Marriage by Cormac Burke. This was for my Catholic Read Your Way to Heaven, year 3, I think I'm still on. I've been working on this for a long time. It's going to take me way longer than the 5 years, but that's okay. This one is about marriage, and the purpose of marriage, the difficulties with modern thoughts on marriage and how they take a toll on marriage. Things like, he talks about how having children helps to strengthen your marriage because it's no longer just the two of you. You have someone else to help you kind of stay connected to your spouse. So overall, this was pretty good. However, this was written in the 90s by a guy who was pretty old. In the 90s, from my research, I think he's still alive, but I think he's also in his 90s now. So kind of an older gentleman writing in the 1990s. It's very sexist. And I don't mean anything about the things he's saying about the importance of marriage and things like that, but every example he gives about young people, children, boys, it always points to sports and academics and career, and girls, he always points to fashion and hair, and it made me a little bit stabby. So that is my warning. Good information. If you can get past the, like, just blatant sexism, and because I'm getting less used to reading blatant sexism, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So, you know, good information, not exactly great examples. I guess that's what I have to say about Covenanted Happiness. So that is it for my February reading wrap-up. Sorry that this is super duper late. I am filming this on March 16th. So that's how ambitious I have been in the month of March. Might be struggling a little bit with this whole year-long anniversary of staying in my home all the time. So we'll see how many books I get through in the month of March. I think it's going to be more like my January than my February, because so far I think I've completed 2 books, but I'm in the middle of like 7 others or something, so not unusual for me, I guess. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please feel free to subscribe, like this video if you enjoy reading wrap-ups, and I will see you in the next one.